Hey, everyone, and welcome back to the Leadership Project, where our vision is to inspire all leaders to challenge the status quo. We are always looking for inspirational people to come on the show and share their thoughts about new topics. And we're greatly honored today to be joined by Zach Mercurio. Zach is a keynote speaker, a consultant, and a researcher with a specialization on purposeful leadership, which people that regularly listen to the show will know this is something that we are very, very passionate about. He researches purposeful leadership, meaningful work, and what it means to actually matter with a view towards positive organizational development. He's also the best-selling author of a book called The Invisible Leader, and that is part of what we will talk about as we go through today. He has a PhD in organizational learning, performance, and change, and he's an honorary fellow at Colorado State University. It's a great pleasure to have Zach with us today. Zach, please say hello to our audience and tell us a little bit more about your background and what led you to be with us today.
Thanks, Mick. Thanks for having me. Like many people, I think, who study meaningfulness and purpose, it's not something in a course catalog when you're an undergraduate that you can kind of pick out. Many of us have had awakenings of some kind, some sort of spark. And for me, that spark came in my first job out of college. I was lucky enough to have a job in advertising where I got paid well. And on the outside, I was successful. But on the inside, I felt like I did not matter. I couldn't see the significance of what I was doing. And I was around people that would come into work and they'd say on Monday, is it the weekend yet? And I was just astounded how many people were living for 2/7 of their lives, the days that begin with the letter S. And I remember I actually went into, and I haven't really told anybody this, but I went into a bookstore in Washington, D.C. during a lunch break, and I saw this poem by the American poet Stephen Dunn. And I don't even read poetry. It was on an end cap in the bookstore. And I picked it up and there was this poem called Everything Else in the World. And the last line was, I want a job so good, like a book, I'll be finishing it for the rest of my life. And I thought to myself, why am I doing what I'm doing? Why am I as a person? Who am I? And along the way, once I had that realization, I started meeting people who do ordinary things with an extraordinary perspective, whether it was a joyful cab driver, a bus driver who had a firm sense of purpose, or someone who was cleaning the streets that I talked to that exuded joy. They talked about their contribution. And after that moment, I went into researching and working with people on how to develop a purposeful perspective in their work and in their lives, so that really people didn't end up like me without that firm sense of questioning of who am I? Why am I? Before I figure out the form of my life, my job or my career, or as I'm in that form of my life, can I ask about my function, right? In good design, form typically follows function, but the way we develop our lives and organizations is we typically say that we should know our form, our career, our job, what we're doing before we understand our function, why we are. And so that's the mission I've been on through research, consulting, just like you've said, writing about this and trying it myself.
I love that, Zach. And there's many things there that I know that we're going to explore during the interview today. One of the ones I want to pick on there is you said that you were successful on the outside, but not necessarily successful on the inside. And I'm going to come back to you later about what your definition is of success. I like what you're saying about people in all walks of life, taxi drivers, restaurant workers, anyone can find meaningful purpose in life if they look for it and they understand who they are. But what was most impactful of what you said is why they are. So let's unpack that a little bit further. Why are you who you are, Zach?
Well, it's taken me almost a decade of exploration. So I never want to, especially on a podcast, give the air that this is just easy, magical work. right? That you'll listen to a podcast and find your purpose. I also don't believe that purpose is out there waiting to be found. I think it's right where you are, waiting to be acknowledged. And that's why I think purpose is crafted over time. The way I define purpose is it's where your unique gifts make a unique difference, where your strengths make a unique impact. So, everybody listening, do you have strengths? Yes. Do you impact people? Yes, you have purpose. It's a matter of how we see the world versus what we see when it comes to experiencing meaningfulness. And for me, I'm the youngest of three brothers, and I was predisposed to search for significance because when you're the youngest, you get really good at either entertaining yourself or comparing yourself to other people. So I was always trying to measure up, and I became very susceptible to looking for significance through outward signals. Like, if I get this good grade, then I'll be successful. If I get this job, then I'll be successful. If I'm in this sport, then I'll be successful, right? And the problem, as you alluded to, that I learned very early on in my life, luckily, was that when you hinge your identity or significance on something you can achieve or acquire, there's always the propensity that you won't be able to achieve or acquire or do that thing anymore. And so too goes your sense of self. And so my susceptibility to that led me into that advertising job and has led me into my work now. But what I really think my work is all about now, after reflecting on what my 5-year-old self most needed, it's to help people realize their inevitable significance, to help people see their significance now, that what they do matters, that they have unique gifts that make a unique impact. That if we saw the world through the lens of not what am I going to do with my life or what should I do with my life, but what should my life do for others, that shift can awaken our own significance. So that's where I am right now. It's almost like who that 5-year-old youngest sibling needed to get out of that cycle of chasing significance through things is what I'm trying to do for other people and as a collective for organizations, companies, and communities.
I'm hearing several things there, Zach, that are all very interesting to me. And congratulations on your success, on your personal success of finding that awareness of why you are. I think that's the most important one to acknowledge. And if clearly you've been successful in your vision and your purpose as well. So, and we'll talk about that as we go along. The things that were really interesting in what I was hearing, Zach, about that 5-year-old self and as you grew up, many of the things that you described were external validation. And then goal attainment of tangible things. But then once you reach that goal, then what then? Right. Whereas what I'm hearing in everything that you're saying, all the way back to your description of the person you going into the bookshop and reading that poem, it's actually about something that is somewhat unattainable. The purpose is something that has momentum and continues forever. What's your reflection on that?
Yeah, the problem with being motivated by a result is precisely the fact that you can achieve it. And as you say, then what? Most of us, I would say, live in an if-then argument. We don't even know it. You know, it's also been called destination addiction, that we will be worthy once we get this job. We will, once we get the quarterly earnings up, we'll be successful as a company, right? And it's a roller coaster because and in psychology, we call it the arrival fallacy, that your brain actually experiences the same thing whether you achieve a goal or not. It's why if you watch the Olympics this summer, one of the biggest mental health issues facing Olympians is a diagnosable psychiatric condition called the Olympics blues. And what's that? That's a arrival fallacy, that if I achieve a goal, what now? If I don't achieve a goal, what now? Now, the only thing we have control over every day has one thing in common, regardless of what we achieve or what we don't achieve, and that's the ability to contribute. So that's why a sense of contribution and focusing on contribution lasts much longer than focusing on an achievement, because achievements come and go. The ability to contribute to a human being is mostly available every single day.
And that's powerful stuff right there. So once again, we're moving from kind of the goal attainment through to something that you can renew every day. So you can wake up every morning with, what can I do to contribute to others today? That's very powerful stuff. And therefore having a purpose that has almost a momentum of itself, that's a perpetual motion machine, because you're out there always seeking that purpose as opposed to achieving a goal. Interesting.
Yeah. Imagine if you imagine, like, let's take, for example, the modern conceptualization of a career, and you ask the question, what should I do? So what should I do next in 5 years? What inevitably happens is you actually narrow your options as you progress in that, because you get a certain skill set, you get certain boundaries of what you can do, where you can do it, versus if you asked about your career, what kinds of problems do I want to use my strengths to solve? All of a sudden, the window opens, attention opens, possibilities expand, because you're not tied to like a particular job or a career to contribute with your strengths. You're tied to using your strengths to solve human problems. The jobs, organizations, careers become mere delivery systems of your contribution versus your identification. And it's a much more sustainable way of experiencing sustained energy. And like you said, that a purpose almost exerts a pulling force on our lives, whereas results and achievements push us for the short term. And so I liken it to like basic physics of, when you're stuck on the side of the road, you don't call a push truck to push your car out of the ditch, right? You call a tow truck because physically it's easier to lift something and pull it than it is to push something. And the same is true when it comes to the psychological effect of having a bigger purpose outside of ourselves, pulling us forward versus relying on results to push us, because we'll always be reliant on the push.
Yeah, I'm loving this analogy of the pulling nature, and also the tow truck that's going to
Yeah.
trouble. I love that. You also have now used the word strengths multiple times in a very short period of time. In fact, you were really focusing in on self-awareness about how your strengths can make meaningful impact. Tell us more about that.
One of the exercises I've done with people, I think over 10,000 now, is helping them write a purpose statement that takes their strengths, which is the intersection between what you love, what energizes you. These are the things that, if I were to interrupt you doing it, you'd be pretty mad at me because I interrupted you, right? Those are the things that you love to do. But it's where that love, that energy intersects with your talents, the things that you're good at. So these are kind of the things that I might ask you to do. You may not love to do it, but I may ask you to do it and you're good at it. I mean, it's just something you're good to do, good at. Other people ask you to do it. And it's where you can find the intersection of what you love to do and what you're good at, that we get this concept of a psychological strength. Now, there's been research in almost every culture through this program called Character Strengths that find that the chances of you and I having the same set of 5 character top strength is like 1 in 7 million or something. So the unique combination of our gifts is like our fingerprint. But let's add on to that, right? The uniqueness of where and how our gifts impact other people is like our true fingerprint. And that's what gives directionality to strengths and what creates that sense of purpose. What is my unique resources, my strengths, the intersection of my passions and my talents, and how are those impacting the people? And I don't necessarily think about it as a big cause, but in impacting the people that I'm going to talk to today. And that's purpose, in my view.
I love this as well. So I've got this picture in my head of pretty much a Venn diagram of, what do I love? What am I good at? And how can those two intersect to create meaningful impact on the world, but contributing to others? It's a really great picture that you're painting there, Zach. Thank you for that. We spoke before about external validation versus more internal. So, and you were speaking about success in that regard. What does success mean to you now?
I don't know where to attribute this quote. I read it in the founder of Tom's Shoe Company, Blake Mycosky's book, Start Something That Matters. And it really resonated with me. And it was a better way of articulating it than I've ever articulated it. And it's that success is finding a meaningful need and filling it better than anybody else. So what I mean by that is the way I take that is finding a meaningful need around you today and using your gift. That's the better, when you can use your gifts to fill it differently than anybody else. And I still think that that's success. Success is, how do we fill the space around us? Viktor Frankl, who's the author of Man's Search for Meaning, and then he was also a concentration camp survivor and a psychiatrist. And he just published, he didn't publish it, Daniel Goleman published an unpublished series of lectures called Yes to Life in a new book, and I highly recommend it. But he said, our meaning in life, and he uses meaning and purpose interchangeably, but he says our meaning in life is how we fill the circle we're in. So how we fill out the human needs that are around us today. And he recounts the story of a tailor's assistant coming up to him after a lecture and says, Dr. Frankl, I love your lectures on the meaning in life, but I'm just a tailor's assistant. And he asked him, he goes, how have you impacted and thought about your impact on the people that have come into that tailor shop? Tell me about that. And that young tailor was so obsessed with being anywhere but where he was in that moment that he wasn't filling out the meaning of his life. And so that's what I believe. It's how we fill the circle around us with our strengths.
That's really impactful as well, Zach. I love this. And I think that's when, I think this was in something that I read from you as well. And you were talking before about people that arrive at a job on Monday and go, I can't wait for the weekend. Surely, if we can find that intersection between what we love, what we're good at, and creating meaningful purpose, then we start looking forward to Monday and we start spending up to 1/3 of our life in a job that we love instead of something that we're looking forward to the weekend. Yeah, love this.
Now, I will want to add one nuance to that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, please.
You can make the job you have the job you love as well. So and what I mean by that is that one of my research studies is with university cleaners, so janitors. Not one of them I interviewed for that study on meaningfulness said that they were born to be a janitor. It was the exact intersection of their ilkajai or whatever it is, their purpose. Every one of them experienced meaningfulness in their job. So one of the things that I know that we can do, and research indicates that we can do, and it's called job crafting, is that how can you use your strengths, your passions, and your talents to make an impact where you are? That's also purpose. So I believe that if you don't learn how to uncover purpose where you are, it's very difficult to uncover it where you want to go. And so there is a skill, and there's a big difference between just having purpose and being purposeful. So if purpose is your contribution, then being purposeful is contribution, thinking, being, and doing. And that's accessible, as Viktor Frankl, who was that concentration camp prisoner and survivor, I think most blatantly displays, is accessible wherever you are.
So what we're talking about now.
So I just want to make that nuance.
Yeah, no,
it's not a job. It's not a dream job. It's a skill set. It's a way of seeing.
And what we're talking about now is reframing your perspective on what you already do, is what I'm hearing from you there. And if you stop, let me play this to you and see what you think. You stop and take a step back for a second and ask yourself these questions. With what I do, how does it help others? Question 1. Question 2, if I stopped doing it, what would happen? Question 3, if I did more of it or I did it better, what would be the positive impact of that? What's your reflection on that for reframing what you do today?
What I love about that is that the questions we ask ourselves determine what we think about. The internal questions we ask ourselves determine our life's answer to those questions. Our lives are almost answers to the questions we ask ourselves. So I love that. And one of the questions I ask people all the time is, think about the thing you dislike most in your job. And they all grumble and think about something. And then I say, what would happen to a human being if you did not do it? And all of a sudden, purpose shows up. And
Ah,
purpose is not always pleasurable. That's a big misnomer. Purpose is not always pleasurable, right? One of the janitors that I interviewed in my study, I asked her what was the most meaningful part of your job. And she started telling me about cleaning the toilets on Monday mornings in the university dormitories. Now think about that after the weekend. It doesn't sound pleasant. So I was a little bit surprised. But she said, every time I go in and do that task, I say to myself, I'm doing this so that these kids don't get sick.
ah,
That so that mentality, right? That's a skill set. She had honed it to be able to use this non-pleasurable task and make it meaningful. And actually what we find in the research on meaningfulness and purpose, especially in work, is that experiencing purpose has less to do with what you're doing and more to do with your approach to what you're doing and your mindset about it. This is obviously very difficult for some people to grasp when they're like, I just need a new job. But it's how I view purpose as a skill as well. And one skill is telling yourself better stories. And as you articulated really well, asking yourself better questions.
that's great, Zach. I want to pivot that now because we spoke about it doesn't always mean pleasure, but you do speak about happiness. Share with us what the happiness trifecta of neurotransmitters are.
Oh, yeah. So UCLA Semel Center for Neuroscience, they actually found a part of our brain. I can't name it off the top of my head because I'm not a neuroscientist, but they found a part of our brain that seems hardwired for contribution. And it's really not surprising, right? I mean, any organism that ceases to contribute dies. And so it's not surprising that as human beings, we flourish because we're wired for purpose to contribute. That's why I say purpose isn't a trend. It's a basic, essential quality of you and I and humans. But what they found is that your brain actually rewards you when you are focusing on your contribution. It's one of the actually most significant predictors of this happiness trifecta of dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin. And these are the neurotransmitters that control for social connection. They also control for mood, they control for movement, and they control for motivation. And so one of the prime ways to experience happiness as a resultant condition is to focus on how we're contributing. And that's why I think happiness is something that you can't pursue. It follows, right? It follows meaningfulness and purpose. And I'll actually go, I don't really like happiness all that much. Well, I like happiness, but I would rather talk about joy, because joy is happiness that's been liberated from circumstance. What we know about happiness is that feeling of pleasure that comes usually when we're doing the thing that makes us happy. Joy is the feeling of having those happiness trifecta neurotransmitters moving through us in circumstances that don't necessarily give us pleasure, but we can still experience joy.
This is interesting. And this is some of the stuff that I've heard Martin Seligman talk about. It wasn't actually wasn't actually his research, it was someone else's that he built upon. I've got to remember who the other person was now. But the pursuit of pleasure versus the pursuit of joy, two different things.
Yes, two different things. And people confuse the word happiness. Some people use happiness actually correctly and associate it with the properties of joy. Yeah. Some people associate happiness. I want to be happy. Like I want to go to a concert to be happy. But when the concert's over, you lose the happiness. So it's actually pleasure that you're seeking. So that's a very important distinction you made.
And think about the world we live in today. Many people seek pleasure. They seek pleasure through immersion in social media, etc.
Yeah.
But it has a very short half-life. More than that, it has a decreasing half-life. So the more you seek pleasure, the more stimulation you need to achieve the same level of pleasure. And this is why people are finding themselves increasingly immersed in social media, because to get that dopamine hit of pleasure, they need to have more stimulation to achieve the same result that they used to. It's quite addictive. Pleasure is addictive, whereas joy is something that is continual. And if you can find those paths to joy where you achieve it, you'll find that you are happy more often than not, as opposed to the roller coaster of seeking what's called the pleasure life, right? This is really interesting stuff. And then getting on to helping others. And this was a self-discovery I made very early as well, Zach. So I feel blessed, like you were saying before. Nothing makes me more joyful than helping someone else or watching them flourish, right? So something I pride myself in as a leader is when I have coached someone and I've developed them, and I stand back and I watch them in action, and I watch them knock it out of the park. And I've just got this, I don't know, I walk away for many days with this, walking on air feeling, right? And it comes from the helping of others.
Yeah, for me, there's nothing more powerful than when I see the moment where somebody really, truly realizes that they matter.
Yeah.
That they do have unique strengths and that they do make a difference. And so we talked about external validation a little bit. There is an important element of this that is externally maintained. So for example, as a community, we give each other the evidence of our significance. So it's not necessarily that external validation is wrong. It's what's being validated and how it's being validated. That's really important to maintain meaningfulness, because I can believe that I matter, but if I don't experience evidence of my mattering, that also has a short half-life, we find. So that's why what you're saying as a leader, that role of maintaining meaningfulness and mattering is really a critical ecological perspective of this.
Yeah, I love that. And it's making me think of, we had Kimberly Abbott, the CEO and founder of a company called Vested, and she's an independent consultant to the United Nations. We had her on the show recently. And the mission of Vested, her organization, is to redefine the definition of millionaire to be someone that impacts the lives of 1 million people.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. So that's beautiful external validation, as opposed to, oh, wow, look at your bank account.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that the meaningful validation of one's significance results in intrinsic value. And that's when I think external validation and community validation is so important. The type and quality of it makes a big difference. You mentioned social media. I think a lot of what's happening is that in our society is that people are fighting for significance. Social media right now is a signal of significance that people are chasing. It's just like the I got a pension was 30 years ago, right? I mean, I think it's just been evolved and been replaced, where we're trying to find these signals of our significance because we're not necessarily experiencing in schools and in our organizations and in our families. And I think that that's one of the things that you're seeing is people are yearning for significance and looking, and I think some limiting or self-limiting places to get it.
This is an issue that the search for likes, loves on Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram. That's an example of the pleasure life as well. And it's very short-lived, and it only matters for a short period of time. And then you're going to seek more again. The other one that worries me as well, and you brought it up earlier in slightly different words, comparison. OMG, comparison. Social media is encouraging, comparison to others. Comparison does not bring anyone any joy.
No. And what happens is we dilute our understanding of our own uniqueness.
Yeah. Wow. That's powerful.
When we compare ourselves, we try to morph ourselves and we try to emulate others. But what's really going to bring joy, as we've been talking about, is how our uniqueness makes a unique difference. And so if we overlook our uniqueness through looking too much at other people, our attention is finite. And we won't have that self-knowledge that we need. I mean, the ultimate security is a positive sense of self-worth. It transcends job, it transcends career, it transcends everything. And that's what I fear most too, is that people are missing out on that ultimate security, which is knowing and believing that I uniquely matter.
And everyone desires this. Everyone wants to feel like they're valued, and everyone wants to feel like they matter. I think that becomes now the perfect segue to this question. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that you and I are lucky, Zach. We've both found our purpose and we get joy from our purpose. I'm going to say that there's a good percentage of our audience are going to be sitting there going, well, that's good for Zach, that's good for Mick, but I don't know my purpose. It's elusive. Tell us more about your thoughts on the path to purpose.
First, individually, one of the things that I encourage people to do is to try asking better questions. As you mentioned, I want to go deeper on that. Instead of thinking, what is my purpose? There isn't a phenomenon called purpose anxiety that when people like you and I talk about this, that we get this, like, I don't know what it is. So I get so frustrated and I just disengaged. I'm never going to find my purpose. Right. And we identify ourselves with the struggle we're in. It's like when someone goes, you should really eat better. And then you Google how to eat better. And there's a million different recipes and you don't know what to do and you get overwhelmed and you just stop. Right. So what I try to advocate for is, instead of trying to find your purpose, try to be more purposeful. So one thing that, as an example of a practice that you could start doing, and try it for 7 days. And even if you don't want to, especially if you don't want to, try it, force the action. Is a couple of years ago, I was doing this purpose work. And I was out in the mornings, was not feeling motivated or energized. I would kind of have this like bad attitude in the mornings. And this is why, this is a constant work in progress. Even someone who studies purpose, this happens. And I started thinking about my internal narratives. And what did I do every morning? I looked at my habits. I wake up, I looked at my phone, my calendar, and I would say to myself, what do I have to do today? Can you imagine, like, if the voice in your head was a motivational speaker? Hey, what do you have to do today, Mick? It's like, you can wonder why we're in despair a lot of the days. So I just shifted that. I was reading some studies on gratitude and gratitude journaling. And I said, what if I wrote down in the morning, how is what I'm going to do today going to impact other people? And I wrote down their names. So say if it was a meeting I dreaded, I would write down their names and I would write down like 1 or 2 things I knew about them. After like a few days of doing this, my whole mindset shifted. Like, I couldn't get out of the reality. I'm a very logical person. I couldn't get out of the reality that there were human beings living lives as vivid and complex and as important as my own that were going to be in that meeting. And me dreading that meeting was me actually dreading my ability to make an impact on these human beings. and once I started shifting that perspective, my attention opened up and I started feeling more motivated. So I think the path to purpose starts with being more purposeful. Start finding ways where you are in your routines to actually see the inevitable impact you make on other people. And as you start seeing the evidence of your significance, you'll start to see themes as to how you uniquely contribute. Do you make people laugh? Do you bring good ideas in meetings? Are you really good at starting a conversation? Those are your unique gifts. And so don't overlook those. And I encourage people to start there.
I love this. It's really great. So how does someone then kind of narrow in on what you've called in your book authentic purpose?
Yeah. So one of the things you might do is, say, as you're going on and thinking more purposefully, and I really want to hit home on that. It's very hard to discover your purpose if you don't think purposefully.
Yeah.
Because I know many people that have a good purpose statement, but can't tell you for the life of them what it is if you ask them. I know many people that have gone through a find your why, find your purpose course, but they don't think about their purpose until someone asks them, have you done this course? Right. So it's very important that this idea of purposeful thinking comes with identifying a purpose. So I know I've hit that home now, but one thing that you might do is, what I call a purpose journal exercise. And you don't have to, however you want to do this, you don't have to write it down. You can, it's helpful, but just ask 3 questions at the end of every day for, I don't know, 7 days. What did I love doing today? Don't be shy and don't think it's stupid either. If you loved going for a run, write it down. If you loved watching a TV show, write it down and what you loved about it. If you loved having conversations and helping friends, write it down. So write down that one list. What would you love to do? Write down another list. What were you good at today? This is very hard for people. We often think at what we screwed up when we end the day. But thinking about the end of the day, what were you good at? Writing some things down. And then write down, how did I impact other people today? At the end of 7 days, you'll have 21 lists. And what you're going to find is that there's a theme. There's themes of that intersection. And that can really help you start thinking about, what is my unique contribution? Do it for 30 days and you'll have 90 lists and you'll definitely see themes. Wow, I guess I really do love that. I guess I am really good at that. And I guess I do impact other people. I guess I do have purpose.
Even though I already am pretty certain about my purpose, I'm going to do this, Zach. I'm going to experiment.
It's very powerful. Yeah, I teach sophomores, so second years in college, who are trying to just figure out what they're doing. I have them do this for a whole semester. And then I actually have them code their responses. So like based on themes. And I've never seen the same intersection of passions, talents, and impact ever in my time working with students. And that's why it's like your fingerprint, and you already have it. But to see our fingerprint, right, we have to put it in the ink and put it down on a piece of paper. To see our unique fingerprint as human beings, we have to make it real, make it visible, and just start the process of crafting your purpose, stating it, even though it might not be your life purpose. State it, put it in your environment, and your environment helps to affirm beliefs about yourself.
I'm going to challenge everyone in our audience to give this a go. I'm going to run a challenge on our Facebook community group.
Beautiful. And let us know how it goes.
Yeah, I want to get everyone.
That would be really exciting.
I already practice self-reflection every day, Zach, but it's not those questions. And this will be easy for me because it'll just be adding 3 additional questions to the ones I already ask myself at the end of every day, which is, what went well today, what didn't go well today, and what would I do differently tomorrow?
Yeah.
I can add some very purposeful questions to those. And it's going to be a good journey of, it's either going to be self-discovery because I'll learn something new, keep an open mind and an open heart and an open will about that. Or it could be just a reaffirmation of, yeah, you're right. That is your purpose. Get on with it.
Yeah.
Very good. I like it.
And for people who are really struggling to see any light right now, just even asking like, who helped me today and who did I help today? And even if it was really small, like at the end of the day, you'll see that you are a part of a human community, despite the fact that many people don't want us to see that because it keeps us consuming social media. You really are. And I believe that. Okay.
Everyone in the audience, watch out for the Facebook community group. As this episode goes to air, you'll see the challenge in there, and we'll keep Zach informed on how we go. I'm really looking forward to that.